Welcome to the YouTube channel, Contact Center Knowledge Hub, your one-stop solution for expert guidance, best practices, and actionable knowledge in the world of contact centers. Explore, learn, and enhance contact center skills. Let's see forecasting method, expert judgment, most important analytical questions with explanation in detail. Let's walk through how to reconcile conflicting expert volume estimates in a structured, analytical way. Let's see first analytical question. We have 3 expert forecasts for next week's call volume. Expert A predicts 95,000 calls. Predicts 105,000 calls. Expert C predicts 100,000 calls. How would you analyze and reconcile these differences to form a final forecast? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. I would approach this situation using a structured and analytical reconciliation framework. We have 3 expert estimates for next week's call volume. Expert A predicts 95,000 calls. Expert B predicts 105,000 calls. Expert C predicts 100,000 calls. Rather than selecting one estimate, the first step is to understand the reasoning behind each input. Expert A may be relying primarily on historical averages and recent stability. Expert B may be factoring in a billing cycle, a marketing push, or a risk buffer. Expert C may be balancing historical trends with real-time operational signals. Step 2 is to compare assumptions across experts. I would identify which demand drivers are common and which are unique. I would also check whether any expert may be unaware of new or upcoming events that could impact volume. Step 3 is to evaluate the credibility and historical accuracy of each expert. I would review past performance to see if expert A tends to underforecast, or if expert B typically overstates demand to manage operational risk. This helps adjust for individual bias. Step 4 is to apply weighted averaging. If all experts are credible, I may apply equal or near equal weights. For example, weights of 0.4, 0.3, and 0.3. This smooths individual variation while preserving expert insight. Step 5 is to define a consensus range. The lower bound is 95,000 calls. The upper bound is 105,000 calls. The midpoint is 100,000 calls. Based on this analysis, the final forecast would be set at 100,000 calls. All assumptions and reasoning would be documented and shared with stakeholders. This approach ensures transparency, analytical rigor, and alignment across teams, while maintaining confidence in expert-driven forecasting. Next analytical question type is the event interpretation. Question 2. If a system outage occurs today, what analytical steps will you take to forecast spillover impact for tomorrow using expert judgment? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. If a system outage occurs today, I would forecast tomorrow's spillover impact using a structured expert judgment approach. The first step is to quantify the backlog created today. I calculate the difference between actual volume and the original forecast. This gap represents the number of calls that were not handled and are now backlogged. The second step is to estimate the spillover percentage. Using historical outage data, I identify what proportion of backlogged contacts typically spill into the next day. For example, past events may show a spillover rate of 40 to 60%. The third step is to analyze the nature of the backlog. I assess whether the contacts are urgent or deferrable. I also check whether the backlog consists of live inbound calls or scheduled callbacks, as urgency directly affects spillover behavior. The fourth step is to evaluate channel behavior. I analyze whether customers temporarily shifted to chat or email during the outage. If digital channels absorbed demand, the voice spillover may be lower than expected. The fifth step is to consult subject matter experts. I speak with operations and workforce teams to understand how quickly agents can clear the backlog. This includes capacity, overtime plans, and recovery speed. The sixth step is to apply the spillover formula. Tomorrow's forecast equals the base forecast plus the backlog multiplied by the expert estimated spillover percentage. The seventh step is validation. I compare the adjusted forecast against similar outage events from the past 6 to 12 months to ensure realism and consistency. The outcome of this analysis is a spillover adjusted forecast that reflects urgency, customer behavior, historical patterns, backlog age, and operational constraints. This expert judgment approach ensures that the forecast is not just mathematically sound, but operationally realistic. Next analytical question is in type detecting overconfidence in expert judgment. Question 3. Experts predict a 20% spike next week due to marketing activity. Historical impact of similar campaigns is equal to 5-8%. Challenge the expert assumption analytically. Think for a moment. When experts predict a 20% spike due to marketing activity, I would challenge that assumption analytically rather than accepting it at face value. The first step is to compare the expert claim with historical evidence. If similar campaigns have historically delivered only a 5 to 8% uplift, a 20% projection immediately becomes a red flag. This does not mean the expert is wrong, but it does mean the assumption requires stronger validation. The second step is to ask for specific, measurable justification. I would probe what has materially changed this time. Is the marketing spend significantly higher? Is the customer base larger or more targeted? Is the campaign message fundamentally different? Is the offer stronger or more time-sensitive? If these factors are not clearly different, the higher uplift may be optimistic. The third step is to review campaign analytics. Marketing teams often have targeting data, lead volume forecasts, or digital traffic projections. I would compare these indicators with previous campaigns to see if they genuinely support a larger spike. The fourth step is to evaluate external factors. I would check whether seasonality, billing cycles, product launches, or market conditions align with higher demand. If no external drivers support the increase, the risk of overconfidence rises. The fifth step is to build a sensitivity model. Rather than forecasting a single number, I would create multiple scenarios. A low scenario at an 8% uplift, aligned with history. A medium scenario around 12%, reflecting moderate optimism. And a high scenario at 20%, representing the expert's assumption. The final step is to recommend a guarded consensus. Unless hard evidence supports the 20% claim, I would propose using a 12 to 15% uplift for planning. This balances optimism with historical reality and reduces operational risk. This approach demonstrates analytical maturity. It challenges assumptions respectfully, validates inputs with data, creates scenario ranges, and avoids inflated forecasts that can harm service levels and cost control. Next analytical question is in type missing data scenario. Question 4. Your last 10 days of volume data are corrupted due to a reporting issue. How will expert judgment help you rebuild the forecast, and what analytical techniques will you apply? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When the last 10 days of volume data are corrupted due to a reporting issue, expert judgment becomes critical in restoring forecast continuity. I would approach this by combining expert input with structured analytical techniques. The first step is to use historical analogs. I would identify similar periods from previous weeks or months with comparable business conditions. These analogs provide a reliable starting point when recent data is unavailable. The second step is to apply day-of-week patterns. Most contact centers have stable weekly seasonality. For example, Mondays are typically higher, Tuesdays stabilize, and Fridays are lower. I would reapply these known patterns to reconstructed volumes. The third step is to leverage operational knowledge. Experts often know what actually happened during the data loss period. This may include ticketing issues, system changes, promotions, or staffing constraints. These insights help adjust the analog data realistically. The fourth step is to analyze cross-channel signals. If voice data is missing, I would review chat or email volumes. Shifts in digital channels often reveal hidden demand trends and customer behavior during the affected period. The fifth step is consensus triangulation. I would combine inputs from workforce management, operations, and the client. If multiple stakeholders independently point to similar demand levels, confidence in the reconstruction increases. The sixth step is to build a reconstructed forecast. A simple and effective approach is to use the formula. Forecast equals analog volume multiplied by the seasonality ratio. This preserves both scale and pattern accuracy. The final step is documentation. I would clearly record all assumptions, data sources, and confidence levels. This ensures transparency and supports later validation when corrected data becomes available. The analytical value of this approach is clear. Even without recent data, logical reconstruction combined with expert knowledge restores forecast integrity and supports sound operational planning. Next analytical question is in type bias detection. Question 5. An expert consistently forecasts 10 to 12% higher than actual volumes. What analytical actions will you take? Think for a moment. When an expert consistently forecasts 10 to 12% higher than actual volumes, the first priority is to analyze whether a systematic bias exists. The first step is trend analysis. I would plot the expert's forecast against actual volumes for the last 12 forecasting cycles. This visual comparison helps identify whether overforecasting is persistent or event-driven. The second step is to quantify the bias. I calculate bias percentage using the formula. Forecast minus actual divided by actual. If the result consistently shows a positive 10% variance, the bias is statistically confirmed. The third step is to understand the nature of the bias. I would engage the expert to determine whether the overforecasting is intentional. In many cases, experts apply informal risk buffers to protect service levels. Understanding intent is critical before making corrections. The fourth step is recalibration. I would adjust future expert forecasts using a bias correction factor. For example, adjusted forecast equals expert forecast multiplied by 1 minus the bias percentage. This preserves expert insight while removing systematic inflation. The fifth step is retraining and feedback. I would share evidence of historical overestimation with the expert. The goal is not correction through authority, but alignment through data and realism. The sixth step is weighted blending. To reduce risk, I would combine expert input with statistical models, peer expert opinions, and recent demand trends. This ensures no single biased input dominates the final forecast. The final step is governance. I would introduce monthly expert accuracy and bias reports. This creates transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement in expert judgment. The analytical insight here is simple but powerful. By quantifying bias and applying calibration, expert judgment remains valuable, credible, and operationally reliable. Next analytical question is in type AHT Insights. Question 6. Experts say AHT will increase next week due to training new agents. What analytical steps do you take to quantify this? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When experts say that average handle time will increase next week due to training new agents, I translate that qualitative insight into a measurable, operational impact. The first step is to determine the new hire mix. I calculate what percentage of the total agent population will be new agents versus tenured agents during the forecast period. The second step is to reference historical AHT behavior for new hires. From past data, new agents typically handle calls more slowly. For example, their AHT may be 15% higher than that of experienced agents. The third step is to build a weighted AHT calculation. I apply a weighted average using the proportion of new hires and tenured agents. Weighted AHT equals the new hire percentage multiplied by new hire AHT plus the tenured percentage multiplied by existing AHT. This converts experience mix into a single, forecastable AHT number. The fourth step is to compare this weighted AHT to the baseline. I calculate the incremental increase in AHT and convert it into additional workload hours. This shows the true capacity impact of training-related inefficiency. The fifth step is validation with operations. I confirm what types of calls new agents will handle. If they are restricted to simpler call types, the AHT impact may be lower. If they handle all call types, the impact may be higher than initial estimates. The final step is staffing adjustment. An increase in AHT directly increases workload. I reflect this by adjusting required headcount or staffing plans to protect service levels. The analytical outcome is clear. A subjective expert statement about AHT increase is converted into a quantified, defensible staffing and workload adjustment that supports accurate planning and decision-making. Next analytical question is in type, handling sudden variance. Question 7. Today's volume is 30% higher than forecast. Experts claim the spike is temporary. How will you analytically determine whether the spike will continue tomorrow? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When today's volume comes in 30% higher than forecast and experts believe the spike is temporary, I would validate that assumption using a structured analytical approach. The first step is to analyze call reasons. I would identify what is driving the spike. Is it billing related, a system outage, a payment issue, or a specific customer notification? Understanding the trigger helps determine whether demand is one-time or recurring. The second step is to examine customer behavior. I would check whether customers are making repeated attempts due to unresolved issues. High retry behavior usually signals that demand may persist beyond a single day. The third step is to closely monitor the first-hour volumes tomorrow. Early-hour demand patterns are a strong leading indicator. If volume remains elevated in the opening hours, the spike is likely to continue. The fourth step is to compare the situation with similar past events. I would review historical cases with comparable drivers. If similar events typically lasted to 2-3 days, I would factor that duration into the forecast. The fifth step is to evaluate spillover potential. I would assess whether today's backlog was fully cleared. If unresolved contacts remain, spillover into tomorrow is likely. The sixth step is expert cross-validation. Rather than relying on a single opinion, I would consult operations, workforce management, and the client. Alignment across multiple perspectives increases confidence in the conclusion. The final step is scenario forecasting. I would model multiple outcomes. A low continuation scenario with a 10% uplift. A medium scenario at 20%. And a high scenario maintaining the full 30% spike. This allows leadership to plan staffing with controlled risk. The analytical strength of this approach is that it combines real data, behavioral analysis, historical patterns, expert validation, and scenario modeling to determine whether a sudden spike is truly temporary or likely to persist. Next analytical question is in type quantifying external factors. Question 8. How will you analytically incorporate weather disruption predictions into your expert judgment forecast? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When incorporating weather disruption predictions into an expert judgment forecast, I apply a structured analytical framework to convert uncertainty into quantified impact. The first step is to identify the nature of the disruption. I determine whether the event involves floods, storms, heat waves, or extreme rainfall. Different weather events affect customer behavior in very different ways. The second step is to map the customer impact. I assess how the weather may affect customers directly. This includes service outages, access limitations, delayed payments, or safety-related inquiries. The clearer the customer impact, the stronger the forecast signal. The third step is to use historical analogs. I review prior periods with similar weather conditions. I analyze how call volumes behaved during comparable events in previous years or seasons. The fourth step is to apply incremental adjustments. For example, historical analysis may show that similar storms led to a 12% increase in call volume. This converts qualitative concern into a measurable uplift. The fifth step is to convert this into forecast impact. I apply the adjustment using a simple formula. Adjusted forecast equals base forecast multiplied by 1 plus the weather impact percentage. This ensures transparency and repeatability. The sixth step is to add uncertainty buffers. Weather forecasts are inherently unpredictable. I therefore avoid single-point estimates and acknowledge volatility. The final step is scenario modeling. I build a low, medium, and high range. For example, a low scenario at 5% uplift, a mid scenario at 10%, and a high scenario at 15%. This allows leadership to plan staffing and contingency actions with controlled risk. The analytical capability demonstrated here is the ability to combine historical evidence, analog reasoning, expert insight, and scenario modeling to responsibly incorporate environmental uncertainty into operational forecasts. Next analytical question is in type forecast governance. Question 9. How will you analytically validate the accuracy of an expert judgment forecast after the cycle ends? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. Once a forecasting cycle is complete, validating the accuracy of an expert judgment forecast is critical for governance and continuous improvement. The first step is to compute forecast accuracy metrics. I calculate MAPE and WAPE to quantify the absolute forecasting error. These metrics show how far the expert forecast deviated from actual volumes in percentage terms. The second step is to measure bias. I assess whether the expert consistently overforecasted or underforecasted. This helps determine whether deviations were random or systematic. The third step is to compare expert predictions with statistical model outputs. I evaluate which approach was closer to actual results. This comparison helps decide how much weight expert judgment should carry in future cycles. The fourth step is assumption validation. I review whether the assumptions used by the expert actually materialized. For example, did the expected campaign, outage, or weather event occur as anticipated? Incorrect assumptions often explain forecast variance more than poor judgment. The fifth step is variance root cause analysis. I analyze why the variance occurred. Was it due to external events, behavioral changes, data limitations, or operational constraints? This step turns variance into learning. The sixth step is recalibration. Based on accuracy results, I adjust expert weights for the next forecasting cycle. Experts with higher accuracy receive greater influence, while lower accuracy reduces weighting. This ensures fairness and performance-based governance. The final step is documentation. I formally record accuracy results, root causes, and corrective actions. These learnings are fed back into the forecasting process to improve future expert-based decisions. This governance approach ensures that expert judgment remains accountable, data-validated, and continuously improving, rather than subjective or unchecked. Next analytical question is in type when expert judgment conflicts with models. Question 10. If statistical forecast is equal to 80,000, expert forecast is equal to 95,000. Who should you trust, and how do you analytically think for a moment? And here is the answer. When a statistical model forecasts 80,000 calls, but expert judgment predicts 95,000, I do not automatically trust one over the other. Instead, I make an analytical decision using evidence, assumptions, and structured logic. The first step is to review historical accuracy. I compare recent performance metrics such as MAPE. If the model shows a 7% error over the last 3 months, while expert forecasts show 11%, the model has demonstrated higher reliability. This establishes a credibility baseline. The second step is to check for upcoming events that the model may not fully capture. I assess whether experts are aware of confirmed marketing campaigns, seasonality effects, billing cycles, or product issues that were not included in the statistical model. If such events exist, expert insight gains relevance. The third step is to evaluate the strength of expert assumptions. I examine whether the expert forecast is backed by documented, measurable assumptions or whether it is based on intuition alone. Well-defined assumptions increase confidence, vague reasoning reduces it. The fourth step is sensitivity analysis. Rather than choosing a single number, I test multiple demand points. I assess operational impact at 80,000, 87,000, and 95,000 calls. This helps understand risk exposure across scenarios. The fifth step is to apply a hybrid forecasting approach. I blend both inputs using weighted logic. For example, 60% weight to the statistical model and 40% to expert judgment. This balances mathematical consistency with business insight. The final step is documentation. I clearly record the decision, the weights applied, and the reasoning behind them. This ensures transparency, auditability, and continuous improvement. The key principle is this: forecasting decisions should not be opinion-driven. They should balance statistical evidence, expert insight, assumption strength, and risk management to arrive at the most defensible outcome. Next analytical question is in type multi-channel interpretation. Question 11. Voice volume dropped by 12% last week, but chat volume increased by 18%. Experts claim this shift is due to customer preference for chat during a product upgrade. How would you analytically validate whether this shift is real or temporary? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When voice volume drops by 12% while chat volume increases by 18%, and experts attribute this to customer preference during a product upgrade, I would analytically validate whether the shift is real or temporary. The first step is to analyze customer intent and contact reason codes. I would examine what customers were contacting us about in each channel. If chat inquiries are heavily concentrated around the product upgrade and voice contacts in the same categories decline, this supports a genuine channel shift. The second step is to review the timing of the change. I would check whether the volume shift aligns precisely with the product upgrade launch date. A tight timing correlation strengthens the case for causality rather than coincidence. The third step is to compare the pattern with past upgrade cycles. I would analyze previous product upgrades to see whether similar voice-to-chat shifts occurred. Consistent repetition across events suggests a structural behavior pattern. The fourth step is to review customer feedback and satisfaction metrics. I would look at CSAT, post-interaction surveys, and customer comments. If customers explicitly mention chat being easier or more convenient during upgrades, it indicates preference rather than forced migration. The fifth step is to rule out operational or routing distortions. I would verify whether voice experienced high average speed of answer, IVR issues, or call blocking. I would also check if chat was promoted more prominently on the website or app. If so, the shift may be operationally driven rather than preference-driven. The sixth step is to evaluate reversion behavior after the upgrades stabilize. If voice and chat volumes normalize within 2 to 3 days, the shift is likely temporary. If elevated chat usage persists, it may represent a lasting channel shift. The final step is scenario forecasting. I would build to forward-looking forecasts. Scenario A assumes the shift is temporary and reverts to baseline. Scenario B assumes the shift is permanent and adjusts channel mix accordingly. The analytical insight here is that channel interpretation must be driven by data, behavioral evidence, timing correlation, and scenario modeling, not assumptions alone. Next analytical question is in type forecasting with contradictory data. Question 12. Your model shows a downward trend. Experts predict an upward trend. Operational data from the last 7 days is flat. How do you analytical direction of the forecast? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. The first step is to compare the strength of evidence. The model reflects longer-term historical patterns. Operational data captures short-term stability. Expert judgment typically incorporates event-based or forward-looking insights. Each input represents a different time horizon. The second step is to evaluate expert assumptions. I would examine whether experts are referencing concrete drivers such as marketing actions, seasonality, product issues, policy changes, pricing updates, or billing cycle movements. Clear, documented assumptions increase confidence in an upward signal. The third step is to assess model recency bias. I would check whether the statistical model is overly influenced by the most recent weeks. If recent softness is temporary, the downward trend may be overstated. The fourth step is triangulation using weighted logic. I would either assign equal weight to the model, expert input, and operational data, or adjust weights based on historical accuracy of each source. This prevents any single signal from dominating the decision. The fifth step is to derive a directional confidence score. If expert assumptions are strong and evidence-based, I may lean toward an upward adjustment. If the model and operational data align, I would favor a flat or downward outlook. The direction chosen reflects the strongest combined signal, not individual opinion. The final step is executive communication through ranges. I would present 3 scenarios to management. A conservative scenario assuming continued decline, a balanced scenario assuming stability, and an aggressive scenario assuming growth. This allows informed decision-making under uncertainty. The analytical insight is that forecasting direction should be determined through triangulation of evidence across time horizons, not by relying on a single data source. Next analytical question is in type assumption strength testing. Question 13. Experts say, we expect 10% growth next week because of the monthly billing cycle. How do you analytically evaluate whether this assumption is strong? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. The first test is historical consistency. I review past billing cycles to see whether they consistently produced a 10% spike. If history shows wide variation, such as 5 to 12%, the assumption is less precise and should be treated as a range rather than a fixed value. The second test is alignment with recent customer behavior. I analyze whether payment behavior or digital adoption has changed. If customers are increasingly using self-service channels, billing-related calls may be lower than historical norms. The third test is timing accuracy. I verify whether the billing cycle actually falls in the forecasted week. Billing dates often shift by 1 or 2 days each month, and even small timing errors can materially affect volume. The fourth test is channel distribution validation. I check whether the billing cycle historically drives voice contacts, or whether chat and email absorb a growing share of demand. If voice impact is declining, the forecast should be adjusted accordingly. The fifth test is support from early indicators. I look for leading signals such as increased website traffic, app logins, IVR entries, or billing page visits. Early movement in these indicators strengthens confidence in the assumption. The sixth test is overlap with other events. I confirm whether marketing promotions, policy changes, or system issues are occurring at the same time. Overlapping events can inflate perceived impact and lead to double counting. A strong assumption is one that is historically consistent, aligned with current behavior, correctly timed, channel validated, supported by early indicators, and independently confirmed. This analytical testing ensures expert judgment is evidence-based rather than assumption-driven. Next analytical question is in type distinguishing noise versus signal. Question 14. 3 days of abnormally high volume occurred, but experts believe it's random noise. How do you analytically determine if these spikes represent a true trend? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. The first step is to check event alignment. I investigate whether the spike coincides with known drivers such as system issues, product changes, marketing activity, seasonality, or billing cycles. If no triggering event exists, the probability of noise increases. The second step is historical comparison. I compare the same days from the previous month and the previous year. If similar spikes appear consistently on those dates, it suggests a recurring pattern rather than randomness. The third step is variance analysis. I compare the spike magnitude to normal volatility. If typical day-to-day variance is 4 to 6%, but the spike is 15 to 20%, this exceeds normal noise thresholds and warrants deeper investigation. The fourth step is called driver analysis. I review intent codes and contact reasons. If the spike is concentrated around specific issues or topics, it is likely event-driven rather than random. The fifth step is qualitative validation. I examine agent notes, quality feedback, and customer comments. Repeated mentions of the same problem across multiple contacts indicate a real underlying driver. The sixth step is forward confirmation. I closely monitor early hour volumes the following day. If elevated demand continues into the next cycle, it signals a developing trend. If volumes quickly normalize, the spike was likely noise. The analytical insight is simple but powerful. Noise fades quickly and leaves little trace. True signals leave footprints across timing, magnitude, customer intent, and multiple data sources. This disciplined approach ensures forecasting decisions are based on evidence, not assumptions. Next analytical question is in type Expert Forecast Overshoot. Question 15. Experts overestimated last quarter's volume by 18%. They are again giving a high estimate for next quarter. How do you analytically decide whether to trust their input? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. The first step is to calculate historical expert accuracy. I would review metrics such as MAPE and bias over multiple prior quarters. This establishes whether the overshoot was an isolated incident or part of a consistent pattern. The second step is assumption review. I would compare last quarter's expert assumptions with what actually occurred. Were the assumptions fundamentally wrong, or were they directionally correct but poorly timed? This distinction is critical in judging credibility. The third step is to evaluate whether market conditions have genuinely changed. I would assess factors such as new product launches, policy or pricing changes, customer base growth, or regulatory shifts. If structural changes exist, higher forecasts may be justified. The fourth step is to check for intentional risk buffering. Many experts overforecast deliberately to protect service levels. Understanding whether the high estimate includes a safety buffer helps interpret the true expected demand. The fifth step is cross-validation. I would compare expert input with statistical model outputs, client-shared demand projections, website or app traffic trends, and relevant economic indicators. Convergence across sources increases confidence. The sixth step is weighting adjustment. If historical accuracy is low, I reduce the expert's influence in the final forecast. If the reasoning is strong but risk-adjusted, I retain a moderate weight rather than full trust. The final step is scenario-based forecasting. Rather than making a binary decision, I build a range of outcomes. This allows leadership to plan for uncertainty without overcommitting to an inflated forecast. The analytical insight is that expert input should be evaluated through both credibility and assumption quality, ensuring decisions are evidence-based and risk-aware. Next analytical question is in type Impact Layer Breakdown. Question 16. Experts predict next week will have 5% increase due to billing, 7% increase due to marketing, 4% increase due to app outage. How do you analytically verify these impacts are additive and not overlapping? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When experts predict multiple demand drivers for the same period, the key analytical risk is double counting. In this case, experts expect a 5% increase from billing, a 7% increase from marketing, and a 4% increase from an app outage. Rather than adding these numbers directly, I analytically test whether the impacts are truly independent. The first step is to analyze event timing. I check whether billing cycles, marketing campaigns, and the app outage occur during overlapping time windows. If events happen simultaneously, their effects may not be fully additive. The second step is to understand the customer journey. I assess whether the same customers are affected by multiple events. For example, if customers calling about billing are also exposed to marketing messages or impacted by the app outage, the demand drivers overlap. In that case, simple addition would inflate the forecast. The third step is historical correlation analysis. I review prior periods where billing and marketing occurred together. I check whether combined volume increases historically exceeded 12%, or whether they plateaued near that level. This reveals whether impacts compound or saturate. The fourth step is to validate impact independence. If events influence different customer segments or different contact reasons, their impacts may be additive. If events influence the same customer group or same intent, the impacts are dependent and must be adjusted. The fifth step is to calculate overlap explicitly. For example, if billing and marketing overlap by 40%, I reduce the combined impact accordingly. Overlap reduction equals 7% multiplied by 40%, which equals 2.8%. The net impact then becomes 5 plus 7 plus 4 minus 2.8, resulting in a 13.2% total increase. The sixth step is subject matter expert validation. I consult operations, product, and marketing teams to confirm whether customer overlap is real and material. SME Insight helps validate assumptions that data alone may not fully capture. The analytical insight is clear. By applying causal analysis, dependency mapping, historical correlation, and explicit overlap adjustment, I prevent overestimation and produce a more defensible forecast. Next analytical question is in type early indicator analysis. Question 17. Experts predict next week will be high volume, but early indicators like IVR hits, web traffic, app usage show no change. How do you analytically decide whether expert input? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When experts predict high volume for next week but early indicators such as IVR hits, web traffic, and app usage show no change, I analytically test whether the expert input should be accepted. The first step is to evaluate the type of event experts are predicting. Some demand drivers, like billing cycles or marketing campaigns, usually produce early digital signals. Other events, such as regulatory changes or potential outages, may not show early indicators. Understanding the event type sets the right expectation. The second step is to assess timing. I check when early indicators typically appear for similar events. Some impacts surface 7 days in advance, while others emerge only 1 or 2 days before the spike. A timing mismatch does not automatically invalidate expert input. The third step is to analyze lag effects. Certain customer behaviors occur only at the last moment, such as payment deadlines or outage reactions. In such cases, flat early indicators may still be consistent with a future spike. The fourth step is to check operational signals. I consult frontline teams and review agent feedback to see if unusual customer questions or confusion are already emerging. These qualitative signals often precede measurable volume changes. The fifth step is conditional scenario planning. Rather than choosing one forecast, I create decision triggers. If early indicators remain flat beyond a defined cutoff, I follow the baseline forecast. If indicators begin to rise, I switch to the expert-adjusted forecast. The final step is expert validation. I reconfirm assumptions with subject matter experts. I distinguish between speculation and fact-based expectations supported by confirmed events. The analytical insight is that expert judgment should be anchored to leading indicators and conditional evidence, not intuition alone. This approach preserves agility while protecting forecast accuracy. Next analytical question is in type pattern recognition. Question 18. Experts claim the spike this week is similar to last year's tax season spike. How do you analytically verify that the pattern matches? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When experts claim that a spike this week is similar to last year's tax season spike, I analytically verify the pattern rather than relying on surface-level comparison. The first step is to compare spike magnitude. I assess whether the current increase falls within the same range as last year, for example 12 to 15%. If the spike is significantly larger, such as 20 to 30%, it may indicate a different underlying behavior. The second step is to compare timing. I check whether the spike occurs in the same week or on the same days as last year's event. True seasonal patterns tend to repeat with consistent timing. The third step is to compare call reasons and customer intent. I review contact reasons to see whether customers are calling for the same purposes as they did during last year's tax season. Different intents suggest a different driver, even if volumes look similar. The fourth step is to compare channel mix. I analyze whether customers are using voice, chat, and digital channels in the same proportions as last year. A shift in channel mix may signal a change in customer behavior rather than a repeated pattern. The fifth step is to compare duration. I measure how long the spike lasts. If last year's increase persisted for a defined number of days, I expect a similar duration if the pattern truly matches. The sixth step is to evaluate macroeconomic and policy differences. I consider whether tax rules, filing deadlines, system changes, or regulatory processes differ from last year. Even small changes can materially alter customer behavior. The analytical insight is that true pattern recognition requires multidimensional matching across magnitude, timing, intent, channel mix, duration, and external context. Only when these dimensions align can I confidently confirm that the current spike mirrors last year's pattern. Next analytical question is in type scenario rationalization. Question 19. Experts provide two scenarios. Best case, plus 5%. Worst case, plus 25%. How do you analytically select the operating forecast? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When experts provide a best-case scenario of a 5% increase and a worst-case scenario of a 25% increase, the goal is not to pick the extreme, but to analytically select the most reasonable operating forecast. The first step is to evaluate the probability of each scenario. I review historical frequency of similar events to understand how often outcomes have aligned closer to the best case or the worst case. This helps assign realistic likelihoods rather than treating both scenarios as equally probable. The second step is to rate the strength of the underlying assumptions. I assess whether expert assumptions are concrete, such as confirmed campaigns or system changes, or speculative, such as anticipated customer reactions. Stronger assumptions carry more weight in the decision. The third step is to check early indicators. I review signals such as IVR activity, customer queries, and web or app traffic. If early indicators are trending upward, the probability shifts toward the higher impact scenario. The fourth step is to select a planning midpoint. In many cases, the midpoint between 5 and 25%, approximately 15%, provides a balanced and defensible operating forecast. This avoids both underpreparation and unnecessary overstaffing. The fifth step is to layer risk buffers based on service level sensitivity. For accounts with strict SLAs or high customer impact, I may plan closer to the worst-case scenario. For stable environments with flexibility, I may operate closer to the midpoint. The analytical insight is that forecasting is not a binary choice between extremes. It is a probability-weighted decision that balances evidence, risk tolerance, and operational consequences to arrive at the most reasonable forecast. Next analytical question is in type Final Expert Judgment Validation. Question 20. In a governance review, experts justify a 10% increase using only past experience with no data or drivers. How do you analytically handle this? Think for a moment. And the answer is here. When experts justify a 10% forecast increase using only past experience, with no supporting data or drivers, I handle this through structured analytical governance. The first step is to request specific drivers. I ask a direct question. What exact factor is contributing to this 10% increase? Experience alone is not a measurable input. The second step is to request historical evidence. I ask which past events this experience is based on. I then review actual data from those periods to see whether similar increases truly occurred. The third step is relevance validation. I evaluate whether those historical events are comparable to the current situation. Differences in customer behavior, digital adoption, policies, or product mix can make past experience misleading. The fourth step is to check current indicators. I review early signals such as IVR traffic, web or app activity, and operational feedback. If these indicators do not support a rising trend, the assumption is considered weak. The fifth step is forecast adjustment. In the absence of evidence, I do not reject expert input entirely, but I reduce its impact. Instead of a 10% increase, I may apply a conservative 3 to 5% adjustment. The sixth step is documentation. I clearly record the assumption gaps and lack of supporting evidence in the governance review. This ensures transparency and accountability. The final step is weighting control. Expert inputs supported only by memory or intuition are assigned lower weight in future forecasting cycles. Evidence-backed inputs receive higher influence. The analytical insight is clear. Expert judgment adds value only when it is supported by data, logic, and observable signals, not recollection alone. This discipline protects forecast accuracy and strengthens governance credibility. Thanks for watching my YouTube channel, Contact Center Knowledge Hub. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights. See you in the next video.